You know that Queen song that's like, bum, bum, bum. Another one bites the dust. I think it's called Another One Bites the Dust. Yep, that's the mood today, mostly.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it's that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Lots on today's show, the future outlook of the tight end room. I like it. I do. Will Oregon have a 1,000-yard receiver this year? That's an interesting question I'll explore on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, why did I mention Queen's song, Another One Bites the Dust? Well, Oregon was in the final two for five-star athlete Brandon Arrington, who is one of the top 10, 20 players in the class of 2026. This would have been a really nice Thursday news bump for Oregon to go out and land their second five-star of the 2026 cycle, carry that momentum into the weekend with Ryder Lyons committing next week. Lo and behold, he goes to Texas A&M. Now, I do want to address one thing in particular with regards to this recruitment. I was told that NIL played a pretty sizable factor here, which I have no objection to. Just to be clear. Where's my unlimited NIL crowd? Where did they go? Where are they? Are they hiding? Did they disappear? Did they run back to the corners of the internet that don't exist? Where are those folks? It's weird. Because I remember hearing for quite a while that Oregon just had unlimited NIL, and Oregon only, buys players. They don't actually recruit, and they can give all the money that they want. And yet, two high-profile recruitments this cycle, Jackson Cantwell first, offensive tackle who went to Miami, number one at his position. Brandon Arrington, who's one of the top defensive backs but can also play receiver and is one of the most unique recruits in this cycle, both go to places where, reportedly, the NIL offers a significant reason why. That's strange. That's really strange. It's almost like the unlimited NIL conversation was dumb, low-hanging, mind-numbingly stupid fruit for people to take and lob shots at Oregon with. Almost as if. Who could have possibly me? It was me. I'm going to toot my own horn here. I foresaw that was the case. Anyway, so now that is out of the way, this is a recruiting miss for the Ducks. Let's not misconstrue the conversation here. This is someone who the Ducks have been after for a while. They made it into the top two, and once again, this is the third. I guess if you count Cody Green, this would be the fourth, but really, this is the third pretty high-profile recruiting battle for a five-star recruit where Oregon has been in the final two or three and missed. There was Cantwell, there was Jared Curtis, and now there's Brandon Arrington. And I know some of you out there are frustrated that this is, another high-profile recruitment that doesn't go Oregon's way. I don't think you should look at the 2026 class and say it's going to be a complete and total mess, but it's kind of like watching a baseball game. So those of you that are baseball fans out there will get what I'm saying. When you watch one at-bat or one inning, let's say one inning of offense from the Mariners, who stink at the offensive part of the game, which is the exact opposite of Oregon baseball. It's really funny to be a fan of those two teams because they could not be more opposite for me personally. But when you watch one inning and then you go 1, 2, 3 with 2 strikeouts, you go, all right, that's not a good inning. I'm not going to sit here and say that means the entire game is going to suddenly be ruined and that it's going to be, another one-run output that often results in that for the Mariners. But when you watch one inning, you can't have a takeaway for what's going to happen the entire game. You're going to have another 2 or 3 times through the order. You've got a lot more innings. There will be other chances. But then once you get to the 6th inning and you've only compiled 2 hits and a runner hasn't reached second base, now you have enough data to look at the holistic view of the game and go, okay, this is going to need a dramatic late game surge in order to produce the results we're looking for. I don't think Oregon is in the 6th inning. I do think they're in the 3rd, and they've got a couple of hits, but they're not having an offensive explosion. They're not bursting onto the recruiting scene in the class of 2026 the way they did last year a bit. I said long ago on the show, by June 15th, I wanted Oregon to have, or at least in that sort of range, I wanted them to have multiple commits. They've gotten one. Not where I'd like him to be. I've talked about Messiah Hampton a lot this week here on the show, and I like him a lot. Oregon hasn't yet turned that into legitimate momentum. There is good news. Xavier Larice, Oregon four-star safety commit, announced he is shutting down his recruitment, so there's no worry of a flip there. Tristan Phillips, who I've had here on the show, one of the top linebacker commits in the class of 26, is reportedly close to shutting down his recruitment. He was tweeting out, the duck emoji, arrow down, and a lock with a question mark. And of course, Oregon fans filling up his mentions as they should. Guy's awesome. And given what he's done to entrench himself in the Oregon-Washington rivalry, I feel pretty good about him staying committed to the Ducks. Not just because he came here on my show, but because I got a sense on that one. So it's not all bad news. They join Kendre Harrison and Tredarian Ball as 2026 recruits that have officially shut down the recruitments and are saying, nope, I'm not taking visits. I'm not taking phone calls, nothing. I'm fully committed to being here. That is all great. That is definitely good news. That's more a prevention of bad recruiting news than it is active good news. And Oregon's waiting for the second part. And the next piece of great recruiting news that could come for the Ducks is on June 24th. That is Tuesday, right? Tuesday. I think trying to do math in my head. And let me tell you, I don't use math in my head as much as I used to when I was in high school and college. Frankly, in college, I didn't have that many math classes either. And so the math gets done for me. Stats are input when I'm doing a play-by-play broadcast onto the screen in front of me. I don't have to tally it up myself. That was for high school times. Anyway, so that will happen next week, June 24th. And that's another one that Oregon is in the mix for. I talked about him over on today's episode of Locked On College Football with Brian Smith. If you want to go check that out and hear kind of our thoughts on the latest, is the highest ranked uncommitted quarterback gets ready to make his decision. He just took an official visit to BYU. Brian feels good about Oregon and BYU. USC could be in the fold as well. Michigan, Ole Miss seen as kind of outside chances there. But it's another 5-star miss on the trail for the Ducks. I do still think they're in position to get to 4 or 5. Arrington's going elsewhere maybe makes it more likely that it'll be 4 rather than 5 total 5 stars in the class of 2026. But that be the latest. And Ryder Lyons is the next big name to watch. And I don't know if I want to check my Twitter mentions if he picks BYU or USC, but we shall be discussing next week regardless. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. The outlook of the tight end room. Fascinating. And will Oregon have a 1,000-yard receiver? All to come on today's show. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs have been in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you wanted to bet on college football, you could do that? Yeah, you can, because you've got win totals. Oregon's is 10.5. You've got national title odds. Oregon top 5 nationally. That's pretty good. Big Ten title odds. Oregon top 3. Also pretty good. Everything you possibly want. Heisman odds. You can go pick who you think is going to be named the most outstanding player in college football this year. It's all over there at FanDuel.com. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. What a deal. What a deal. You just don't want to miss that. Hit your first $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so as we continue to search for good news on the recruiting trail, let's get to some mailbag and Spencer scale of agreement takes. You submit them via YouTube comments, Twitter, become a Locked On Ducks insider, all ways to get into the mailbag and such. And this one comes in from Zaheem for Spencer's scale of agreement, where you submit a take and I give you a 1 to 10 and an explanation as to why I agree or don't agree. If Sadiq goes to the NFL after the season, Vander Plug will be Oregon's starting tight end in 2026 and have over 400 all-purpose yards and 5 total touchdowns. Ooh. So, the over 400 all-purpose yards is a nice call. Plug's a pretty good athlete. I don't know if, he's got the Kenyon Sadiq traits where he can be given the ball on fly sweeps and screens. Not just tight end screens like Terrence Ferguson used to catch, but the type that Sadiq had last year. Not really normal for a tight end to catch tunnel screens very often, but he's of course a freakish athlete. I'm going to go with a 3 on this one, and here's why. I like Vander Plug. We saw in the spring game he caught a couple of passes over the middle in contested fashion from Achilles Smith Jr. Watch for that combo potentially to continue to evolve in the next couple of years. And by the time Achilles Smith Jr. is Oregon's starting quarterback, which would probably be 2027-ish, it would be probably the earliest, 27, 28. If Plug is still around, then yeah, maybe that, we think back to that moment as, oh, hey, that's when that connection all really got started there. But the reason I'm only putting a 3 on this, is it possible? Sure. The tight end room depth, though, ahead of him is going to at least feature Jamari Johnson, Louisville transfer, presuming he sticks around. Because Johnson, remember, has played 2 years of college football already, has 3 years of eligibility left, because he was a redshirt freshman at Louisville this past year. So he'd probably be the leader in the clubhouse, given his experience. I think he's Oregon's number 2 tight end this year. He'd be the leader in the clubhouse to be Oregon's number 1 tight end. Now, depending on what he showcases there, could definitely alter how that position group battle looks going into next season. But the other guys you have to think about are Roger Saliapaga, who I thought in limited action as a true freshman last year looked good and suffered an injury. He's got to be able to bounce back from that, of course. That's a name you have to think about. But then there's Kendre Harrison. And yes, Kendre Harrison would be a true freshman. He's a 5-star tight end. I believe he's the highest rated tight end recruit in the history of Oregon football. I could be wrong on that, but I think that is right. There is. There's no tight end higher, right? So he's the highest rated, which is just a ranking, sure. Oregon tight end recruit ever. He could be ready to contribute as a true freshman. Tight end's always been a spot where true freshmen would be able to make an impact right away. Terrence Ferguson did his first year. Kenyon Sadiq did a little his first year. I think he could have done more, except Oregon had depth in the tight end room in front of him with Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert. But I think that position allows for guys to come in, especially someone of Harrison's caliber, to make an impact right away. He could come in and shine. So I think the competitive depth in 2026 in that room is going to be really good, and there won't be a clear-cut favorite. Like, I know Kenyon Sadiq is Oregon's tight end 1 this year. Until we see, spring ball play out in the spring game next year, we might not know where that particular position group is going to be at. I like the added detail, though, of 400 all-purpose yards and 5 total touchdowns. We just don't know a ton about Plug at the college level yet, so I'm going to put a 3 on that one there. This one came in from Twitter. Hot take: Bear Alexander will be a rotational piece until he eventually gets his position taken by a younger player. His spring game was unimpressive, and I seriously think there's some real talent brewing underneath him. Well, I agree with the second part. Things can go bad quick, and he could transfer out. Well, that can't be seen as a crazy take. It really can't. He left Georgia after the national championship season, where I think he was a rotational guy. He was good at USC. He was their best defensive lineman. Did they have a bunch of great ones? No. Was he clearly the best one? Yes, absolutely, while he was there. He did leave USC basically in the middle of the season last year. I think he sparsely appeared in 4 games and then basically said, I don't want to play football for USC anymore. and now he's with the Ducks. So his body physically doesn't need more development. Lanning has spoken in the past about, guys in the trenches needing multiple seasons usually to be ready to contribute on the offensive or defensive line, which makes plenty of sense compared to, a receiver, a safety, or even a tight end sometimes. But he doesn't need more physical development. He needs technique and motor development more than anything else. So if Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning, and Tony Tuioti get that out of him, he is one of the most talented players in Oregon's defensive line room, which, to the point of your second question, is saying something because the depth behind him is really good. You still have Terrence Green. I'm thinking like beyond the top two guys. I think your starting defensive tackles are Bear Alexander or Amari Washington. Aiden Breland, though, taking Bear Alexander's spot by the end of the year would not be the craziest thing in the world. It really wouldn't. And Bear's potential is immense, but when he's been at two different spots and hasn't been able to put it all together, it's hard to place that specific expectation on him, which is why it is important to go out and recruit and retain depth at every spot that you can, because if it doesn't work out or if he were to get dinged up, you got to be able to fill the spot with somebody that can still produce. I think Breland's incredibly capable of that. I was messaging with one of you on Twitter yesterday about this, and the fact that Aiden Breland, when Jaden Moore and Amarion Winston entered the transfer portal, was someone that played legitimately impactful snaps in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, I think is pretty telling. So I'm going to put a 5 on this one. I think it's equally as likely to happen as not, and I don't feel that strongly one way or the other. I'm not totally with you on the spring game was unimpressive. I saw a couple reps that looked really good, and I do think Oregon's offensive line depth, despite what Roman said the other day, is pretty good. I just had to throw that jab out there. I'm just messing. But I think that Oregon's offensive line depth was solid. I did think he had a couple of moments where he looked pretty good, and I do agree, though, there's real talent brewing underneath him. And that's the good news. If he doesn't produce, if he shows up and, just kind of is going through the motions again or doesn't look like the guy who was recruited as a borderline 5-star coming out of high school, then, yeah, he probably will get replaced by Terrence Green or Aiden Breland or Jericho Johnson or any of those guys. Tioni Gray, like there are a lot of names in there that could prove themselves to be more capable than him. I understand why this staff that Lanning in particular has had a relationship with him going back to his time as a defense coordinator at Georgia. So I understand why they bring him in. I do think while his situation is really, really interesting, if he doesn't produce at a high level, Oregon's got a lot of other options there. So, I'll put a solid 5 on that one, where I'm right down the middle. Like I think it's just as likely to happen as it is to not happen. Do you think I'm done with the Spencer scale of agreement? Nope, absolutely, positively not. More on today's episode of Locked On Ducks. All right, Marty Marr sends this one in. A wise philosopher once said, one of the keys to happiness is to have something to look forward to. I could not agree with that anymore. This is not part of the agreement. I'm a 10. That's a 10. When I have stuff to look forward to, as I kind of do all summer long, I'm recording the show before I go and see my brother and a couple friends, go to Disneyland, play some golf in Southern California. Yeah, I'm with you there. What's your Spencer scale of agreement on this take? Next year, Oregon will have the best receiver room in the country. Peruse who we'll have next year along with our experience at that position. What say you, go Ducks? Best in the country? Man, Jeremiah Smith next year will still be at Ohio State. They might have, or they will have 5-star Chris Henry Jr. coming in. I don't know if Carnell Tate will still be around, but he's really good. The best in the country, they'll have a better room next year than they will this season because so many guys will gain valuable experience. And though I am not glad that Evan Stewart got injured, I think it makes things more challenging for this room. It will allow for guys to get reps in big games they wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And so I think about a guy like Jurion Dickey or Kyler Casper or Jeremiah McClellan, Justice Lowe maybe. Those guys are going to see more targets at the very least than they would have if you'd had Evan Stewart in the room this year. And this applies to DeCorian more as well. The best in the country. Yes, I host Locked On College Football. No, I do not have a 2026 outlook of most teams' receiving cores memorized in my memory bank here, or as Zola would put it, in my data banks. If you get that reference, let me know, because it means we'd be really, really good friends, or at least we'd get along. So the best next year, I think your depth is going to be good. You don't know who's going to transfer out. You don't know who could get hurt. Gatlin Bear's coming in as a 5-star. I think Oregon could have a top 5, minimum top 10, like bare minimum top 10 receiver room. I think top 5 is on the table. You're going to have second year DeCorian Moore. You could have second year playing at full health Jurion Dickey if he has a sizable role this year. You match that with a potential Evan Stewart return. I don't think your question would actually hinge on that, because guys are going to get so much experience this year, and then I'll gas up the hype train in the offseason going into next year. So best receiver room in the country next year? 4. I'm going 4. This may be breaking news. Oregon is not the only place that has a lot of talented wide receivers in there. If you said top 5, I'm going to be at about an 8.5. But number 1, the best in all of college football, LSU recruits dudes every year. Ohio State recruits dudes every year. Those would probably be, off the top of my head, your biggest competitors for that particular title of the best wide receiver room in all of college football. But yeah, Oregon's going to have a chance. Junior Adams has recruited this. You have Messiah Hampton as a true freshman. Dylan Gresham was, a big standout of the spring game, of course. The options will be plentiful. It's just a matter of, who fills the void. You won't have Malik Benson because this is his final year of eligibility. You won't have Gary Bryant Jr. This is his last year of eligibility. I think Justice Lowe would be back. So you're probably looking at a top line of receivers that starts with DeCorian. Let's presume that my gut is correct and Evan Stewart has played his last game as a Duck. Just a presumption. Not what I'd like to have happen, just a guess. Let's say he's not there. Your receiver room next year is probably looking like DeCorian Moore as your number 1 receiver. Probably Jeremiah McClellan as a number 2 with Jurion Dickey. Maybe Kyler Casper still around. But then you work Gatlin Bear into the fold, and consider that that Dylan Gresham could be like number 4 or 5 receiver with what he showcased back in April. I'd say that can be as talented of a receiver room as Oregon's ever had. And I think DeCorian could just be a big-time go-to guy. I'm so stoked to watch him play football in a real setting this year. So that's going to be – I just got like goosebumps thinking about that. We're just over 2 months away from watching DeCorian Moore play an actual college football game, and the hype train on this podcast, when he catches a long touchdown or does something crazy, it is going to be outrageous. I might just sit here and talk about him for 30 minutes. I could. I'm the executive producer of the show, so you'd all be at the mercy of my desires there. So, wrapping up with this, Nick sends this in. Okay, Spencer, I have 2 hot takes. Number 1, Oregon will have no 1,000-yard receivers. They will have 4 500-yard receivers. Here's the biggest part. Gary Bryant will have a breakout year and lead all receivers with 800-plus yards. Take number 2 and the hottest take. I believe Kenyon will lead the team in touchdowns. I don't believe that is a common thing. I see Bryant as a sleeper on the offense. Thanks. This is some good stuff. There is good stuff in there. So I assume by putting receivers in quotation marks, you're including all pass catchers. So Gary Bryant to be Oregon's leading receiver this year, without Evan Stewart in the fold, he's the most experienced guy. This is his 6th year of college football. He was a borderline 5-star recruit coming out of high school, 3rd year with the Ducks, knows the offensive system really well. The more I think about it, Him or Justice Lowe. He and Lowe are the two guys that I pointed to when the Evan Stewart injury news came down and said these are the players most likely because of their experience and talent to take the catches that Evan Stewart had last year and was going to have this year. So Gary Bryant will have a breakout year, lead all receivers with 800 plus yards. 6. I'm giving that. I'm giving that 6. I don't think that's crazy at all. Oregon having no 1,000-yard receivers. 9. I'm at a 9. I'm not going for a 10 because maybe DeCorian goes bonkers and sets the Oregon freshman single season receiving record, or maybe Gary Bryant Jr. has a big year. But without Evan Stewart in there, who I would have predicted to probably have a 1,000-yard season had he stayed healthy, I think the receptions, the targets, the yards, touchdowns, all of it, I don't think it all gets funneled to one guy. I think it gets really spread out. And there's so much depth in this room. I think opposing secondaries are going to have a tough time figuring out who do we want. Like I was talking about with Seiko on yesterday's show, in their best corner, AJ Harris. Who's he going to cover? I mean, if you come out, in, let's say 11 personnel, and you got Mekhi Hughes a running back, Kenyon Sadiq at tight end, DeCorian Moore's in the slot, Gary Bryant Jr. is a receiver, and Malik Benson's on the outside. Where are you putting your NFL caliber corner for Penn State? If you want to take away one of those guys, like he, did Stewart in the Big Ten championship game, okay. You saw how that went last year. Tez Johnson, 11 for 186 and 2 touchdowns. Pretty good. Pretty good. So no 1,000-yard receivers. Yeah, I'm at a 9 with that one. They will have 4 500-plus yard receivers. 4? I think Sadiq could get there. I think DeCorian gets there. I think Bryant could get That's not insane. That's not. No, I'll go 7. I'll go with 7 on that one. So that was an awesome collection of takes for me to evaluate. And Gary Bryant being, I know I decided to break them up, even though you didn't necessarily want me to. But again, my show, that's just kind of how it rolls. So Bryant is the sleeper on the offense. 100% agree. That's a 10. That's Gary Bryant is the biggest sleeper in the Oregon receiver room. That is a 10. Okay. No, it's not a 10. It's not a 10. That again is a 9. That's a 9. I said it and it just felt not quite, but close. But very, very close. So keep the takes coming. This has become my favorite segment to do here on the show. You send in a take, I give you the agreement here on the show and explain why. So that's where we end the show this week. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.